Hi, good evening, everybody. It is Reva Emunah. We're recording live in Svat. It is Monday evening, May 30th, 2022. Or le Lamed Iyar, right? We're entering the 30th of Iyar, and we are entering, I haven't counted yet, but B'ezrat Hashem, we will be entering Malchut of Tiferet. Right, Malchut of Tiferet. So we are learning B'ezrat Hashem, Rabbi Nachman's teachings written down by Rav Nassan, Likutei Halachot, Hilchot Shavuot, Inyan Shavuot, he calls it. It's in Orach Chaim, right? That's at the volume. In my set, it's Chelik Shalosh, volume 3, but I don't believe that it's the same in all of the sets. But it is Hilchot Shavuot. I'm going to do a bit of a review. Hi, honey. I'm so happy you're joining me. Because we were having a lot of problems with the Wi-Fi today at the Bat Midrash. So the class started and stopped 4 different times, and many chunks of the recording were lost. So I am going to begin with a bit of a review. You can go back and listen to the recording, although again, it's very, very spotty. That's from class 1 today. The second recording from today, which was Malchus Beis David, it cut out once, but only for a couple of minutes, and that recording should be much smoother than this one. So Hila, who archives all of our shiurim, this is Shavuot preparation. Formally, it's going to be class number 1, because like I said, the other recording, we were having a lot of technical difficulties. Okay, so please God, we will begin. Just take a little minute to breathe, to enter the space, to connect our neshamot. Whoever's on Zoom right now, whoever's listening to this at whatever point you're listening, just take a moment. Become aware of your vessel, your body, and your neshama as Hashem is breathing it into through you. B'ezrat Hashem, right? Our kavanah is to be able to prepare our vessels, and by vessel we mean our will, our desire, our emunah, our vision, our mind, our beliefs, right? Our beliefs about ourselves and Hashem and the world and Torah, our emotional body and responses and desires and impulses and triggers. We call that our emotional body. And of course, we're in the week of Malchut, so our communication, our speech, our tefillah and prayer, our emunah, as it's deeply connected to Malchut, our actions and behaviors, our physical body and its health and strength, how we use our physical body and how we treat our physical body, how we care for our physical body, the things that we say to our physical bodies. Right? We ask Hashem to help us to prepare all of those different levels of what we call vessels, kelim. And of course, with the beautiful understanding, right, and awareness that when we enter Shavuot, we are met by the energy of the 50th gate, what we call Share bina. Another term that we use is grace. And the idea being that we come with all of this hashka'ah, all of this effort, all of this intentionality, all of this kavanah, all of this preparation, and all the different levels that we just mentioned. And at the same time, we have the awareness that what really activates our spiritual growth is grace. It's Hashem's unconditional, loving response, loving blessings, presence, and meeting us and blessing all of the fruit of all of our effort. So I'm going to do a quick review because, like I mentioned, we did do this today in class, but the recording, the Wi-Fi kept going in and out, so we missed the flow. So I just want to catch us up to speed so that we'll have the flow, and then we'll continue tonight, Bezrat Hashem. So again, we are in Likutei Halachot, Shavuot, also written here as Inyan Shavuot, Halacha Aleph. And here, Rav Nassan is giving over Rabbi Nachman's teachings as expounding upon a piece in Likutei Maharan. This is Likutei Halachot. Likutei Maharan, Siman Yud Gimel, which is the 13th Torah in the first section. We're not going to learn that Torah now. Maybe we will go back and review that Torah, but right now we're going to learn the Halachot from Likutei Halachot. But there he is quoting that Ma'amau, and it says, Shehi Kabbalat Torah, right? Ayen Parashat Perush HaMa'amau, Ashrei Ha'am Hashkacha Siman Yud Gimel. Now this is a little bit of an introduction, and Rav Nassan teaches us there. V'haklal lehamshich hashkacha shlema hu al yedei shvirat tavat mamon. Right, and Rav Nassan is teaching us there that when we want to deeply step into and deeply bond and deeply bind ourselves to walking in Hashem in a very particular way of hashkacha pratit, or very direct and immediate and present divine providence and guidance, right? So to be kind of consistently in dance with the flow of call, respond, call, respond. One of the greatest spiritual ways to step into this is by breaking the hold that money has on us. In other words, our fears around finances, around not having enough, around not being able to control the flow. And the best way that we can increase the flow, paradoxically, is by stepping into giving more tzedakah. The idea being, again, to break the hold of the illusion that our money is directly connected to our efforts and our energetic output, right? And to come back to the source that everything that we have and everything provided for us is directly out of a flow of hashkacha pratit, or immediate and dynamic and living and intimate and present connection with Source, our Creator, Hashem, the Makor HaBracha. Ki al yidei shvirat tavat mamon nimtak hadin v'nimshach hachesed v'nitgaleh b'chinat Mashiach. So here, Rav Nassan teaches us, right, that when we break the hold, that I have to hold on to all of my money, to all of my resources, right? And it's not just money, it's all of my resources, my time, my energy, my effort, right? My money, whatever the resources are, because they're limited and I don't have enough. That attitude of lack and scarcity actually gives rise to what we call dinim, to the constriction of the flow. And if we want to open up the channels and ad kadei kach, right? Even to opening up the channels of literally birthing Mashiach consciousness and the rebuilding of Hashem's home in the world, right? The Beit HaMikdash, physical home in the world, physical coordinates in time and space that connect heaven and earth, right? So he's saying, and draw down consciousness into the world. And by consciousness, again, we mean to be present, not to be ruled by worries and fears of the past, or any obsessive compulsive thoughts around the future, right? Fears and scarcity and fears of a lack of control, or survival fears, or not having enough, right? He says there's a way that we can step out of the hold that those types of beliefs and perceptions and responses have on us. They actually increase fear and anxiety. And the more anxiety and fear and lack and scarcity, the more we water those seeds of reality, so to speak, the more the universe, Hashem, source, responds in kind to that fear. So now he's saying the opposite. And this is a great tool for also revealing Torah in the world. We mean direct and immediate. Hi, Rochelle, welcome. Being in flow in the moment, in the present time with Hashem, and therefore with abundance and with shafa and with bracha, both on the material level and the spiritual levels. Ki al yedei hada'at yecholin lekabetz velikach nefashot bivchinat velokeach nefashot chacham. And now he's saying, when we have this awareness and this presence, and we're actually able to be present in the moment, because we're sort of giving over and handing over our fears, right? Our fear of the past and our fear of the future, and our desire to know for sure the outcome and to control the outcome and to control the circumstances. When we give that over, we're actually able then to literally elevate not only ourselves, right, but many souls around us. And he says, right? And then, okay, I'm not going to unpack this now, because again, we did this today in the Bat Midrash. And he says, and by doing this, we invite an experience of immediate and intimate and dynamic connection with Hashem, that we call that hashgacha pratit, right? Personal responses, immediate responses, intimate responses, right? Because in other words, we're initiating a change in the type of relationship that we would like to have. So we're interested in deepening our trust, in surrendering more control, right? In deepening emunah and bitachon, belief and trust, and also deepening and believing, and then planting seeds in the world, that the more we step into being an open and unblocked and unrestricted, and therefore less fearful tzinor or channel for Hashem, that when we step into that role, abundance flows through us, both for ourselves and for others. Okay. Ki haTorah hi bechinat ha'reot, bechinat tlat gevanin de'ena ubat ayin. Again, this is just a little bit of review, because all of these pieces got cut out of the recordings today at the Bat Midrash. So we're sharing a double meaning here, right? To say that Torah is connected first and foremost, right, with sight here, right? Sight, li'ot mashu, to see. So it's connected to sight in that the eye is consists of three parts: the white of the eye, the color of the eye, the iris, and the pupil of the eye, the black hole in the middle. And each one of those things is connected to an energy center. The white of the eye is connected to the flow of Shefa, or what we might call Chesed, or Avraham Avinu. The iris, or the various colors of eyes, like green eyes, blue eyes, hazel eyes, brown eyes, right? And whole yellowish eyes, the whole spectrum of colors of eye color is connected to Tiferet, because Tiferet is always connected to broadening the spectrum, right, away from the polarities of black and white, or the polarities of the extreme states of flow, which we call chesed, the white of the eyes, or gvura, receptivity, which here we're calling the black pupil of the eye, because again, right, it's what draws the light in. But he's also making a play on words here, and he's also referencing the re'ot, which is the lungs. And the lungs, again, come in the middle of the middle column, right? So they are a few things. They are harmonizing between the fire of the heart, right, and the water of the mind. Another way we could say that is the fire of the heart is, yes, it's warmth, but it's also, it can also be anger and like too much passion almost, right, that burns us out, not kind of a steady fire. But when we refer to the water of the brain or the mind, again, we're talking about water can give us a lovely quality of objectivity, of rational thought, of critical thinking. But when it goes too far, it can have a quality of disconnection and coldness, right? So the air, and this is as true going this way across the body from right to left as it is going up and down. So when air is going from right to left, the far right side is going to give us the quality of water, or chesed, or an outward flow of energy. And the left side is going to give us the quality of fire, right? Or a receptive or even a limiting quality to the flow of energy. It's to take in energy or to even block or limit energy. And the middle column, again, is always going to be about synthesizing and restoring the flow of giving and receiving. So here he's speaking about that was right to left. And again, just to review, when we're going from top to bottom, then the top is going to be, again, the brain or the mind as connected to the energy of water, or an output of energy, of information. And the heart is going to be, again, having the quality of fire, of a receptive nature, right? And in order for the two to not devour one another, because they're such polarized energies, one is an extreme outward flow, one is an extreme receptive quality, right? And we know, right, like too much fire and it boils away the water, too much water and it quenches the fire. So the mediating element is the element of air. Right? Air helps to mediate so that there is peace, so the water can fully be water, the fire can fully be fire, and they don't devour each other. And so in Kabbalah, this quality of air is always going to be what exists between partners. Okay, I am checking. Am I taking this from the Zohar? Yes. Yes, I am. Not just the Zohar. There are other Kabbalistic texts as well. But yes, this is the basic construct of the tree of life. the 10 sfirot. Yes, thank you. Okay, so he continues here and he says, ועל ידי זה שאנו סמוכים להתורה, אנו סמוכים להראות אור ריאות, ואזי כוח הריאות בא בבחינת הכאה, ואזי אנו חוזרים ונצטיירים בעיניו, שזה בחינת השגחה שלמה. So again, here he's using the example of sight and connecting it into, first and foremost, this idea that's brought often in Torah of that Eretz Yisrael is the land where Einei Hashem Elokecha, I think the word is mabit, mi reshit hashana ve'ad sofit hashana, right? Which is this idea of that in Eretz Yisrael, Hashem's eye is always watching from the beginning. In other words, Hashem never goes to sleep. Hashem never turns away, right? From the beginning of the year to the end of the year. And what the Mekubalim mean by that is that nothing is turned over to energies as in cause and effect, right? Like a mechanical type of way of something set in motion. And so to speak, Hashem steps away. And now the thing just continues in and of itself, right? We call that cause and effect, or right, like the stopwatch theory, right? That Hashem created the world, but is no longer intimately and personally involved in what's happening in the world. And we say, no, it's exactly the opposite. And especially in Eretz Yisrael, right? Especially Einei Hashem Elokecha ba, thank you, from Elishava, ba mi reshit hashana. This is something that the Reva would quote very often in his letters, right? And the idea when we say Hashem's eye is on Eretz Yisrael, what we mean by that is hashgacha pratit, divine providence, right? That everything that is happening and unfolding is being intimately revealed to the person, step by step, in a dance of a call and response, right? I show up a certain way and I get a response, and I can almost even gauge, whatever, however you pronounce it, where I am, right, in my relationship with Hashem and myself and everything that's going on in the moment, by paying attention, right, by looking around, by also by zooming out from just the smallness of my own maybe self obsession, right, and self concerns, and maybe zooming out a little and getting a broader perspective of what might be happening here in the spaces in terms of how I'm being invited to respond. And Rabbi Nachman is saying a wonderful way to activate this is to step out of cause and effect. That cause and effect says, if I have $50 and I give $40 away, I'm only going to have $10 left, and I'm not going to have enough money. That's a world of cause and effect. However, a world of hashgacha pratit is, I have $50 and I give $40 away. Now I've opened the vessel. Now I can have $80, because literally this is something that Hashem promises, right? That and the whole area of giving tzedakah is matched doubly by Hashem. And we're encouraged and we're even taught that one may test Hashem in this area. And the idea is to test Hashem to strengthen our Emunah, and to see that, as counterintuitive and paradoxical as this sounds, it's the secret of how to step into flow. That in flow, the more you release your hold and you let go and you give away your fear and you step into trust, the more flow is available. And it's as true on the level of breath and oxygen, right? And worry, right? Or obsessive thoughts or obsessive compulsive thoughts, as it is on the level of flow, shefa, money. Is that clear so far? Does anybody want to ask a question or want something clarified? Okay, so we'll continue. So he says, So he's saying here, וזה בחינת תיקונה המרכבתא אילאה ומרכבתא התתא. He says this is a tikkun of fixing the upper merkava and the lower merkava. And the system is not allowing partnership. Exactly. Yes. And this is part of why he's inviting us into, ooh, so juicy, thank you, this awareness as a way to deepen the Shavuot experience, because Shavuot it's the twins, it's Gemini, right? It's the face-to-face relationship, the intimate face-to-face relationship. And in Torah, when we say panim el panim, right, first and foremost, we know we're talking about pnim el pnim, right? Our insides to our inside, sorry. And the way the Mekubalim teach, what we mean here by panim or pnim, is really what we're talking about is the inner ratzon, is the inner will. How much am I willing to be seen by Hashem? And how much am I willing to see Hashem showing up in every detail of my life? Okay. So, by the way, all of this is just it's actually an introduction before he's going to take us into preparing for Shavuot. And he says like this, Shehem b'chinat shnei shinin b'chinat shnei sichliot ki yesh sechel shel b'chinat lekichat hanefashot v'yesh sechel bet she'oleh imahem umevi Torah. And he says there's two levels of consciousness. There's a lower level of and these are referred to, again, I'm not going to unpack any of this right now. Sorry, this is just an introduction. But he's talking about there's the shin on the tefillin. There's a shin that has 4 crowns, right? And there's a shin that has 3 crowns. And he's saying the difference is that the shin, I need to unmute. I'm muted? Am I muted? Let's see. Reva needs to unmute us. Oh, do I need to unmute you? Ask to unmute. You want to be unmuted? Let's see. Goodness. Wow, I will do my best. Sorry, I can't. I don't know how to do it. I'm so sorry. But you could write in the chat box. I'm so sorry. I don't know why. However, these.
Oh, you just did it. You did it. Kol hakavod.
I did unmute you, but I wasn't able to unmute Rochelle. Okay. Yes. You want to ask a question? No. No? Did you have a question?
Well, I was going to ask you to expound on how Shefa, giving away money and opening your flow, how is it with the lungs? Is it when you exhale more, you get more air inside?
Oh, Yofi, beautiful. Okay. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'll just say a tiny bit about that. And then because I want to really take us into the text. So the lungs is, again, remember we said the whole quality of air is this quality that is like Shrina B'neihem, the quality that that connects. It's the element that connects. It's the element of peace. So you can see it in terms of shefa and flow, right? That wherever air comes in, it creates connection between fire, which means to withhold money, right? And water, which is the giving of money, right? And the air element is always what creates almost like the H, right? The flow of giving, receiving. This is part of the reason Chazal tell us that Torah is given always over in air signs. For example, Matan Torah, right? And Shavuot comes in Gemini, which is an air sign. And when we get the second set of Luchot, it's in Tishrei, which is Libra. And again, we're going to have the balancing scales, right? So the flow. And in Aquarius, which is Shvat, right, which is the Dli, Moshe Rabbeinu begins to do a whole review of the Mishnah Torah, right, of the Torah that he's given us so far, of the oral Torah, of Torah Shebe'al Peh. Again, from this quality of air being the element of communication, of sharing speech back and forth, of being able to share shefa. Here, the shefa is in the form of information instead of in the form of money, right? But it's sharing wisdom through the quality of air. Was that clear enough for now? Shava? Oh, I muted you. Somehow it's muted.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. So let's continue. But just again, this is mamash just a hakdama. That's why I'm not unpacking it. I'm so sorry. But just to say again, Rabbeinu teaches that right, that the lungs in general in the actual physical body have that same quality of creating peace between the fiery heart and the water of the mind or the brain, right? Of course, the Balatanya, right? It's all Hasidus and Kabbalah. So all the tzaddikim and the holy masters are teaching the same thing. And so much so that they teach us that the wings of the kruvim, right, are actually the lungs, and they're fanning the alon, which is the heart, right? And again, mediating, right, between the elements of fire and water, and fanning, cooling the heart, right? So that the heart doesn't step out of its boundaries, so to speak. Okay, all of this was an introduction, and I think we'll understand more as we go inside the text. Okay, so now we're in Sif Aleph. V'zeh b'chinat Shavuot shenikra atzeret. Right, so now Rabbeinu is taking us into why do we call Shavuot an atzeret? In other words, he's saying it's not really a chag or a holiday in its own right. It's actually the point of where a whole journey that we began on Leil HaSeder. And just as we have Shmini Atzeret on one half of the year, right? And it's exactly the same sort of setup, right? We have 7 days of Sukkot, and then we have Shmini Atzeret. So also here we had 7 weeks of Sfirat HaOmer, also followed by an Atzeret, right? By some additional adding on of, right, the grand finale. And it's always going to be connected to the 50th gate or the number 8. By 50th gate, and so when we have 7 sets of 7 times 7 is 49. So when we step into the next set of 7, that would give us the number 50. Or if you have 7 and then plus 1, something that's 1 above 7, of course you get 8. I hope that was clear. So there's always a deep connection between 8 and the number 50. The 8 is when there's 1 set of 7, and then we go beyond that. And 50 is when we have 7 sets of 7, and we go 1 beyond that. But energetically, they're connected. And they're connected to Chen, to Shalei Bina, to the 50th gate, to the level of grace, right? Where we do all this isarusa dilatata, we do all of this spiritual effort, and we plant and we sow, and we reap, harvest, both physically, very physically here, because it's also talking about agriculture, but also Vayichen Sham Yisrael. Yes, beautiful. Yes, Elishava wrote. It says Vayichen exactly. It's about receiving the chen. It's the same way that we also end Shmona Esrei by saying Oseh Shalom b'mumav hu ya'aseh Shalom, right? Because we can do all of this effort for clearing and for connecting the lights with the vessels. But the truth is the lights and the vessels always happens on the level of chen. It's the same thing with Hanukkah. So sorry, 1 second, I just need a little drink. Yes, exactly. So here we're saying that Shavuot is sort of reaching the apex, right? And literally the crown, it's literally Keter, of a journey that we began on really Leil HaSeder, but the Sfirat HaOmer journey, of course, beginning one night after when we began counting Chesed. Okay, he says here, the Asifa haynu bechinat shelokeach umeasef hanefashot she'al yedei ze naseh bechinat Shavuot dehaynu kabbalat torah kanal. Right, and here he's saying, so throughout this entire process, it's been a journey of asifa, right, of gathering in. What are we gathering? Well, spiritually, we're gathering, right, the sparks that we elevate every single night of Sfirat and day and counting Sfirat HaOmer. So we're gathering and we're collecting light, and the light is building, right? And also on a level of agriculturally, right? Remember that the barley harvest, or being able to harvest and access the lower energies, right? Because we call barley ma'achal behema, right? The food of the nefesh behemit, or the instinctual, more animal-like qualities of our more animal-like soul. So those are very survival type of instincts. And they can also be laced on the other side with fear, resentment, jealousy, competition, right? Because they're being more driven by the more animal types of nature, right? And we've been gathering and elevating and working through these things. And also as we move into the wheat harvest, right, to more refined states of consciousness, more refined states of connection. Okay, hope that's clear so far. This is, again, somewhat of a review of today's class, because we did this in class, but the connection was really going in and out. It didn't really get recorded so well. And this, say the Mekubalim, is one of the reasons that Pesach precedes Shavuot. Shehu hachana lekabbalat Torah b'Shavuot, that the whole Pesach journey is in order to prepare our vessels for receiving a personal and an intimate and a direct experience and revelation of light this coming Shavuot, right? And it's personal and it's collective. It's both, right? And so in order to receive something into a vessel, first of all, the vessel has to be cleaned and unblocked and repaired and strengthened, and lastly, emptied, which is, right, that's where we're in right now, is Malchut, right, is going more into a state of bitul. And again, it's paradoxical, because as Malchut is about, right, it's sharing cycles with the moon. So when we diminish more of the nefesh behemit self, right, the more animal-like self, it makes more space for the nefesh eloki. Okay. Ki Pesach hu bechinat Avraham ish hachesed, says, right, Pesach is the energy of Avraham Avinu, of just continuous, unconditional giving and flow, right, of life force, of energy, of light, of love, right? Shezeh bechinat ruach nediva. This is a quality of the open-hearted, unbridled, giving, generous spirit. And here we're talking about it on the level of energy, of an outpouring of energy. Bechinat staka, right? So Rabbeinu is hinting to us, right, again, that even Hashem begins the journey of connection by first opening the tzino, opening the channel, right? By giving, right? This was a hint to us from the beginning of this piece. She'al yedei mashbirim ta'avot mamon v'zochin lekabbalat Torah kanal. And this is part of what Rabbeinu is teaching us, right? When we release shefa, right? When we step into being a giver, ironically, it's what activates the connection and the flow of spiritual shefa, of material shefa, right? Of emotional, of physical healing, right? Because this is what's going to happen on Shavuot. We're going to step into the deepest levels of connecting the lights and the vessels. So Rabbeinu is teaching us here, when you want to step into connection, the way that we activate the vessel is by uncorking it, so to speak, right? Is by giving. Giving starts flow going. It starts the flow going. This is one of the reasons that we ate matzah on Pesach. Ki matzah hi bechinat staka. Right? It says because matzah is, again, right? It's this paradox that it's called lechem oni, the poor man's bread, right? So it's an experience of maybe a tzimtzum in actual physical shefa, and yet it's precisely that bread that, right, we invite everybody to come and eat and partake with, right? Kol dichvin, right? We invite anybody, halachmanya, right? This is the bread of the poor person, and at the same time, right, we understand that it's in sharing that actually creates abundance and shefa and flow. כמובן בדברי רבנו נשמתו יעלה במאמר שאלו את רבי יוסי בן קיסמא סעיף nun zayin. Okay, so he's just telling us if you want to delve more deeply into that, then you can go look at Torah 57, but we're not going to do that right now. Ve'al ken zachu az lirchush gadol dahainu ashirut dikdusha shezochin al yedei shvira ta'avat mamon. And Rabbeinu gives us a perfect example, and it says, how do we know that this is true, everything that we're saying? It says, because we lived it, right? Because we called matzah the bread of poverty. In other words, letting go of control, right? And just surrendering into hashgacha pratit. And he says that very act of doing that activated that in the next act, you see that all of the wealth of Mitzrayim was washing up on the shores of Yam Suf. He's teaching us the deepest secret. If you want something, release it. If you want a bracha, share. Right? And he said, this isn't just a cute and sweet thing like we're teaching our kids to share. It's a spiritual principle. If you want, Rev Katz, and I mentioned this again today, but I think it got cut out in the recording. And by Rev Katz, I mean Rev Daniel Katz, right? And often before he leads us into a meditation, right, he says the biggest deterrent to having a spiritual experience is having to have a spiritual experience. It's the grasping and the holding on tight and the directing of Hashem's flow that actually blocks the flow, that creates dinim. It's the release and the surrender into ayin and bittul, right, and into emunah and trusting that actually allows enough spaciousness for flow to be restored and for people to get those things that they're the chisonot filled or the lacks filled. If you don't understand, please write in the chat box. And I guess I have to physically unmute you, but if you have a question around that, right? And so he's teaching us a very deep principle, whether you want a spiritual experience or whether you need actual physical shefa, or whether you want revelation on Har Sinai at the time of Shavuot, the greatest impediment to that is squeezing it, right? Is squeezing it and demanding it and forcing it. And the greatest way to receive it, so one of the tools that we learn often from Rav Daniel is wish it for your friend. Wish for your friend to have this great spiritual revelation, right? But he's saying, whenever you want something dearly, give it away, right? Release the hold on it, release the control, and it actually activates flow. This is a very deep principle in understanding how to connect lights with vessels, right? So that the vessel doesn't shatter or break, right? There's not shvirat kelim, and that actually flow is released. And he's, again, here he's referencing the connection between Yisachar and Zvulun, right? And the partnering, and again, as Elishava so beautifully mentioned before, the partnering, this is a secret into how to step into the partnering of flow. And he's mentioning another ma'amau, which we're not going to unpack right now. And he says, if you want wealth, if spiritual wealth, emotional wealth, relationship wealth, right, physical wealth, he's saying the secret when you want wealth is break your hold and your need to control it by releasing, by giving, by sharing, by giving it away. And that itself brings you into a deep, intimate, face-to-face relationship that's all based on hashgacha pratit, and it releases you, right, from the cause and effect type of relationship, which is generated by fear and generated by statistics, right? Again, if I have $50 and I give away 40, I'm only left with 10. But the Torah doesn't say that. The Torah says if you have $50 and you give away 40, then you have 80, right? Because it increases flow. Okay, so that's from Pirkei Avot. Again, we did this today in the Bat Midrash. So again, we're going to just keep going in the text so that we can catch up to where we got today and really have a B'ezrat Hashem, beautiful, intentional time to prepare our vessels. Okay, so we're in Seif Bet. V'zeh b'chinat omer se'orim u'sfira shematchilim techef b'yom sheni shel Pesach. So Rabbi Nachman is saying, and this is one of the reasons, right, why we begin counting the barley offering, when we actually offer the barley offering, when we had the Beit HaMikdash, right, immediately on the second night after Pesach, right, and we begin this on, right, in America it would be the second Seder, the night of the second Seder, right. Shehu hachana v'hatchala lekabbalat Torah. He says, because this is, we immediately begin preparing the vessels to be able to what? Receive shefa. Which shefa are we talking about here? Kabbalat Torah, right? The new Torah for this year, both for the individual and the collective. By new, I don't mean new, it's a different Torah, but it's new in the sense of in response to where your light is this year, where your vessels are this year, where your body is, where your emotional body is, where your mental body is, right? Where your right? Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, right? And then, of course, on the levels of Chaya Yechida, our collective vessel, our collective will, our collective ability to receive. On the 50th, the Yom HaChamishim, on the 50th day, right? So when we're counting Sfeirat HaOmer and we're working through, right? And it's something we said in class today, again, just a short review so that we can go in deep, right? Is that Leil HaSeder, we are receiving help through eating the matzah and through the Haggadah and through the speaking. We're receiving help to fix the level of the mochin, of the mind, of thought, right? But then the next night, we immediately begin the journey of the next 5 weeks, which is working through Zer Anpin, the emotional body, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, right? Which are the emotional responses, impulses, desires, triggers, right? Trauma responses too, right? That we experience on an emotional level. It's a level of ruach. So we worked through that immediately, starting with the first night of Sfirat HaOmer, which comes on the second night of Pesach. And what was the purpose of all of that? Again, to get our vessels ready for this great new revelation, direct and personal experience of light, of wisdom, of the activation and the connection of lights and vessels. Part of what we mean when we say lights and vessels, let's say part of what we mean so we know what we're stepping into, right? When we say light here, we're talking about potential. We're talking about Torah. We might even say we're talking about Torah shebichtav, right? In other words, it's all of this light, but it's still on the level of the theoretical, right? Beautiful ideas. But what we want is a light that actually integrates in Malchut. So it integrates in our behavior, in our speech, in our dibur, in our prayer, in our tefillah, in our relationships, right? In what we're birthing, in our physical bodies, right? In what we mean, again, in our health, in what we're birthing in the world in terms of our shlichut, our creative missions, right? And literally shining out Hashem's light as it's channeled through our particular vessel. So this is part of what we mean when we say hachana, or preparation of the vessels. Okay, and always with the understanding that the response from Hashem is always much, much bigger than our preparation can ever be. And it's very much like anything in life. You can prepare for birth, you can prepare for marriage, you can prepare for a concert, right? You can prepare and prepare and prepare. And yet the ultimate preparation is to now release and let go of everything that you have prepared and go into bittul, right? Go into nullification, go into surrender and an open, receptive state of being, right? So that's very deeply connected to the 50th gate. And this is, I think, what Rabbeinu is partially hinting to us here, that when you're wanting to receive, the best way to go get rid of that level of controlling and wanting to know how it's going to look and how it's going to come down and when and to what degree is to step into giving. And that activates and generates flow. The first step. It's the first step. Okay. Doesn't it say not to spend more than a fifth? Yes, somebody asked very beautifully here. Yes, the halacha is not to give more than a chomesh. Again, we're talking about halacha here. Yes. But again, what if someone doesn't even want to give ma'aser because, again, of a fear of I won't have enough. There won't be enough, right? They can't give that because then they can't pay this bill or that bill. And that's the invitation to step out of a teva type of relationship, or a nature cause and effect statistics type of holding, and step into hashgacha pratit, that the flow in is something much greater and bigger than whatever hishtadlut or effort that we think that we're doing to earn this shefa or to receive this shefa. That's a very important spiritual principle always, especially when one is coming towards the idea of opening to revelation. I hope that made sense. Okay, so Rabbi Nachman continues. Okay. Seif bet. שהוא הכנה והתחלה לקבלת התורה ביום ה-50. כי איתה שם במאמר הנ"ל, שהחכם הנ"ל מלקט הנפשות טובות, דהיינו הרצונות טובות שנמצא בכל אחד. So here Rabbeinu is beginning to tell us, right, that it's written there, and here he's referencing this other piece of Torah, but he's saying that the wise person begins by gathering, and by here we're talking also about harvesting, right? By gathering the nefashot tovot. What's a nefashot tovot? Dehainu haritzonot tovot shenimtza b'kol echad, right? And here he's laying out an amazing principle. And this, by the way, is the entire shlichus of Malchus Beis David, right? And Mashiach ben David. It's to be the one that knows how to draw out Moshech, right? Mashiach, from, it's spelled differently, but it's interchangeable in the rules of Torah. If the letter sounds the same, like a chet and a chaf, or an aleph and an ayin, right? You can switch them out to understand a deeper energetic meaning behind the word. So from the word Mashiach, we have limshoch, to draw out, to draw down, and to draw out. And this is a great quality, particularly of Malchus Beis David. Malchus Beis Yosef has a different shlichus in the world. It has a different mission in the world. It's a different energy. It's the energy of gathering, right? And also, okay, one second, we'll talk about that in 1 second. But Malchus Beis David is to draw out the first of all, to elevate and to draw out and up the fallen sparks, and retrieve those fallen sparks. So Malchus Beis Yosef is going to be dealing a lot with collecting the tzaddik points, right? Collecting and integrating tzaddik points, as does Malchus Beis David. But Malchus Beis David is also going to go after the fallen sparks, right? The really high sparks that fell into really low places, and to bring them home, to bring those sparks home, right? So that all throughout the stories, and we were learning this a bit today in the Bat Midrash, that Malchus Beis Yosef, right, remember that he did not fall with Eshet Potiphar, therefore he's called Yosef HaTzadik, because the Mekubalim teach the name Tzaddik is only given to one who has mastery over their body, and particularly mastery over how they bond and join in physical intimacy, right? That's why we don't see anyone else being called. I mean, I'm talking about in the tree of life, right? We don't say David HaTzadik, we say Yosef HaTzadik. So that is a very particular energy, the energy of elevation, of elevating, of refinement, right? And gathering together from those elevated states. But Malchus Beis David has a different energy. right? It's the energy, so to speak, of the Baal Tshuva. It's the energy of when, yes, we have stepped into misalignment. And yes, our light has fallen into Rahman al-Islam, right? But dark situations and dark stories and even dark ideas and stories and beliefs that we say to ourselves about ourselves, right? So Malchus Beis David is about going after those big lights that have gotten stuck, right? And bringing them home, showing them compassion and showing them a way back into integration and back to wholeness. Okay, so he says here, right? That is to say, to find not only the good points, but also to find the good ratzon, right? Where maybe you're not able to live it yet or to integrate it yet, right? But Mashiach begins, Malchus Beis David, begins by helping you find where is your elevated ratzon, your will. Maybe you don't know how to get there. Maybe you don't know how to do it. Maybe you don't know how to live it. Maybe you don't even, right, in any way, shape, or form, know how to manifest it out into the world yet.
I love you.
Love you, sweetheart. You're going to.
You're full of heart energy today. Green.
Oh, that's nice. I love it. Amen. I take it. Please text me, honey. Let me know that you got to wherever you're going safely. This is being recorded. Love you. Okay. שנמצא בכל אחד וגם מלקט הנפשות והרצונות שאינם טובים. Right? And he says, right, because understand, we're harvesting. The first harvest begins with the barley harvest, right? And what does that mean? He says, we're harvesting those wills in us that have fallen. We're harvesting those parts of ourselves that have fallen into forgetfulness, into shichacha. Remember that we have all these halachas around leket and pe'ah and shichacha. What happens when you're gathering, right, the harvest? Right here we're talking about the spiritual harvest, and you drop some sparks along the way, right? Or even leaving parts of the harvest. But this is all, I mean, please God, one day we can do these, maybe on Shavuot night, right? Connected to these halachot of leket and pe'ah and shichacha. This is talking about when Chazal are teaching us here about harvesting. So one thing that Chazal want us to notice here is that we are also harvesting not only, right, from Pesach, but we're also harvesting from Rosh Hashanah. From Pesach, we're harvesting at the level of Olam Asiyah, right? Because Nisan is very physical. It's when the physical harvest, barley harvest, begins, right? But when we're talking about a harvest, we're also talking about all of those tefillot, right? Seeds of intention that we pulled out of, right? The Or Ein Sof, or the infinite flow, right? Of potential of all, right? We call that the Or Ein Sof on Rosh Hashanah. And we watered those things with tefillah, beginning, right, on Rosh Hashanah, but continuing. And then the rains came, the physical rains came, right, starting in Cheshvan. But those physical rains is talking about also the tefillot, right? We know there's always a deep connection between prayer and rain. So much so, right? We know that in Gan Eden, right, the fruits and the vegetables and trees, the plants, the flowers, the grass, right, nothing grew. It was all in a state of waiting to be activated. And what was that activation? That activation was tefillah, right? So we have been working on watering seeds of what we call the Or Mekif, the surrounding light, right? The potential of things yet to come into our lives. And now it's harvest time. When we're talking, and we're talking about three different harvests here. We're talking about the barley harvest, right? The omer seorim, or the katzil, right? The cutting down and the harvesting, the barley harvest. And then we're going to be talking about the wheat harvest, right? Or the katzil of chita. And the third harvest that we're going to be talking about is the fruit harvest, or the bikurim, the first fruits, right? So Chazal are inviting us, right, to look at these things are reflective. They're mirroring one another. So what we're saying is all of the spiritual work, and as well as all of the physical work that we have done since Rosh Hashanah, it's harvest time, right? We began to see touchdown between the lights and the vessels. In other words, between the prayer and it activating things in the level of the Olam Asiyah on Chanukah time, right? It's the first time that literally the light and the vessel made contact. That means koach and poal, keter, beginning the descent to come, right? Eventually all the way down into Malchut. I hope these terms are familiar with whoever's online and also people listening to the recordings, right? We're talking about the journey from potential to actual, right? From a vision or a dream or a will, right? All the way down into manifesting that and birthing that in the physical world. So here we're talking about, when we say harvest time, we're literally physically talking about the harvest of actual physical barley and actual physical wheat and actual physical fruit. That we're saying that those are also representative of accomplishments of a spiritual nature, of the work of elevation, of the work of moving from mochin to katnut, right? Or more immature spiritual states of mind and heart and action and relationshiping and connection with our body, to beginning to elevate, right, into more holistic, more whole, more integrated, more expansive, right, perceptions and consciousness and ways of showing up in our relationship with ourselves and with Hashem and with each other. I'm going to pause here because that's so much. And I just want to see if anyone has a question or a comment. And before we go further, I accidentally just clicked on something. If you do, I can unmute you, but I guess I need to know in the chat box that you want to be unmuted. Sorry, it's different settings on this class. Okay, I'm not seeing anything, so I guess that means that we're okay to continue. If not, please write your question in the chat box. Okay. All right. So he's quoting here, right here again, he's talking about this idea of we're harvesting the complete harvest, right? We don't want to leave anything out, meaning we even want to bring home our sad parts, our fallen parts, our resentful parts, our immature parts, right? We want it to be a full harvest, moving all the way from the barley part, which is again a more animal level of consciousness, to wheat, which is when we have da'at, more presence, more awareness, more mindfulness, more consciousness, a more mature way of approaching situations, and a more mature way of pausing before we respond and integrating greater tools and levels of consciousness, and moving all the way into the bikurim, right? And offering the first fruits, and those first fruits to Hashem. We'll say more, please God, as we go deeper. שזה בחינת אריה שבנפש, דהיינו שמלקט מרת נפש בחינת ונפשה מרה לה, דהיינו רצונות שאינם טובים של תאוות עולם הזה, im besami, im haratzon hatov. And we're talking about joining and collecting this harvest so that even the bitter parts of us, the broken parts, the lonely parts, the rejected parts, the abandoned parts, find a way to come home, find a way to get integrated with the higher states of consciousness, with being used also for avodat Hashem, right, in loving service of Hashem, so that every part of us finds a way to come home to, right, to Hashem, right? Meaning not just the pretty, nice, good parts of us. All of us, it becomes like one dance, one song, one tapestry, one journey, right? And again, this is why we're going to have so many references throughout Shavuot to Malchus Beis David, to Mashiach, right? Because this is the ultimate expression of Mashiach, when all the parts find their way back into integration and wholeness. Every spark, every prayer, every desire, right? Every dream that didn't come true, every prayer that seemed to be not answered, right? There's an awareness that it was all being gathered. It was all being gathered, not just the little pretty parts. It's mamish a deep Torah. Sorry, I'm just going in and out of being super congested. Oh my goodness. So beautiful. Somebody wrote, I'm sitting outside at Kever David absorbing all of this. Oh, thank you. So beautiful. Okay, it says, Im Bisami, and offering that, or remember that Rabbeinu is inviting us to remember that the only time that we offer chametz in the Beit HaMikdash, right, in the Mishkan and the Beit HaMikdash, is when? On Shavuot, right? It's because it is about wholeness, the wholeness of the harvest, right? Joining together matzah and chametz, joining together, bringing even the things that we never bring into the Mikdash, right? We never bring sourdough, a sourdough starter, which is chametz, right? We never bring that into the Mikdash, the sour parts, the bitter parts. We don't offer those as korbanot, except we do on Shavuot. Really deep. Okay. Shema'aleh reach tov. And it says, and when we offer it like this, it creates the most beautiful, sweet smell. And here Rabbeinu is referencing the smell of the ketoret, which we know, right, is this combination of beautiful healing barks and herbs and leaves and, right, plants, and also poisonous and smelly, right, herbs and leaves and barks and plants. And the sweetness of the smell is precisely in the fullness. By the way, I was on the bus yesterday visiting my daughter and grandchildren in Yerushalayim, and I was learning the Bnei Yisachar. And he says there that the gematria of Or v'choshech, without the vav, Or v'choshech, equals Yisrael. It's really mamish a deep Torah. V'zeh b'chinat omer se'orim shehu korban mimachal behema. And he says, and this is why the barley offering, right, is a korban that's connected to our animal parts, right, to those kind of grabbing, more survival-oriented, more ta'ava driven, right, driven by fear, driven by survival, driven by the need and the desire for ease and comfort, right, and for security and safety, those parts of ourselves. Dahainu, that is to say, Shema'alin umenifin umerimin kol hanefashot v'haritzonot she'enam tovim shenaflu v'ta'avat habehemiot. It says it's to elevate them, it's to sift them, it's to reclaim them, it's to offer them and wave them, right? All of those fear, all of the desires and all of the fears and all of the parts, right, that got stuck, right? And again, right, I see that, right? Someone's here from Elevation, the Elevation Project. And it's very much what Rav Katz teaches us, right? About at its shorish, at its root, every desire is a good desire. It just lost its way, right? It lost its way. But at its root, what it's really yearning for, what it's really wanting, if we can get it to discover that and remember that, right? And he says, like, even the most extreme desires, right? That seem to be calling us to chas v'shalom, yeah, but to step out of kedusha v'tahara, right, out of integration, out of wholeness and holiness and respect and honoring, right? Really, if we listen to that, what they're crying for, it's always masking in a physical way a deep desire and need for connection, for love, for honoring, for wholeness, for health, for harmony, for integration. I'm just checking the time. Okay, good. So we'll continue. Shehem bechinat marat nefesh, right? These are the bitter parts of life, the bitter parts of us, the bitter stories that we are experiencing, that we've gone through, that we're still going through, right? It's about bringing those parts home, right? Bringing it home. Why did Rabbeinu begin this entire Torah with teaching us the secret of Hashgacha Pratit? Right? It's a really good question, right? So one of the things that Rabbeinu is inviting us into is to understand the fullness of the story. That when we really step back and see through the eyes, the long-term eyes like Leah had, the eyes of Bina, the eyes of what we're really constructing here, what we're really building, not just a temporary building, but a binyan adayad, right? A structure that will nurture and protect and heal, right, forever across all the generations. So when we look from that viewpoint, right, then understand that Hashgacha is very, very full, that it makes room for the misalignments and the falls and the painful stories, right? And that all of that gets included in the unfolding and the building, right, of the story. So that's something that Rabbeinu is wanting us to notice here. Ve'al ken hu hatchala ve'hachana lekabbalat Torah. And therefore, says Rabbeinu, this is like the foundational beginning of preparing our vessel to receive new revelation on Shavuot. Step one is the acceptance of Hashgacha Pratit in my life. That everything that happened perfectly. Even my mistakes. I'm checking the chat box. The idea of bringing all parts of us back and elevating them reminds me of kavanot for shofar. Absolutely. I haven't heard of it related to Shavuot. Is it like coming into a deeper relationship with Hashem, as Shavuot is compared to the chuppah requires us to be in more fullness? Beautiful question. Yes, because remember that everything that's happening on the level of Shavuot, Rosh Hashanah, This, the Mekubalim ask, did Adam and Chava actually have physical bodies, right? On the level of, let's take it a step further back. Thank you. You opened a wonderful question. So remember that in the Gemara, there's a discussion between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua. And the discussion is around when did Hashem create the world, right? And therefore, by extension, when did Hashem create Adam and Chava, right? So the question is, did Hashem create Adam and Chava in Tishrei, and then therefore create the world on Kaf He Elul, right? Or did Hashem create Adam and Chava on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and by extension, the world on Kaf He Adar, right? Why do we care? This becomes a whole long discussion in the Gemara between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua, right? When was the world created? When were Adam and Chava created? And the answer, like any good piece of Kabbalah, right, is that it's both. It's always about the layering and the integration and the living with paradox, and to some extent resolving paradox. And because what it's seeking to do is harmonize the polarity of energies that for our type of mind, the non-Kabbalistic mind, will go, it's black or white, it's either or, it can't both exist at the same time. And to step into the mind of a Mekubal or Mekubelet is to step into a reality that makes space for everything, for integration, for the layering of reality, for the awareness that if you're looking at it, right, we might even say quantum physics, right? If you're looking at it, it's the theory of relativity. If you're looking at it with a certain expectation, then that's what you're going to see. If you're looking for it through a certain mind of judgment, that's what you will find. We see this again and again throughout Torah and Kabbalah, right? So this question of when was the world created and when was Adam and Chava created, one of the answers that the Mekubalim give is that the world is created Rosh Hashanah time on the level of koach. We don't mean here koach like might or power. This is a word used to mean here potential, right? In other words, it's the force of potential, what could be, what might unfold, right? We call that koach, okay? So the Mekubalim say one possible way to resolve this question is that on the level of Rosh Hashanah, everything is being experienced on the level of the mind, on the level of machshava. It hasn't happened yet in Olam Asiyah. It hasn't come to fruition yet on the level of reality, what we are calling reality, right? Physical manifestation in Olam Asiyah, physical, tangible, three-dimensional reality in time and space. It does exist, however, in the level of the upper worlds, right? Where what makes something real there is not that you can touch it and smell it and taste it, right? And hear it and see it. It's real because it's creations happening in the level of energetic structures within the mind. I hope that's so far clear. If it's not, please stop me and ask me in the chat box. So it's kind of what the person in the chat was saying, right? We do have this experience on an energetic level of koach, or the mind, on Rosh Hashanah. But now this second half of the year, we're not experiencing it through our mind. We're experiencing it on the level of Olam Asiya, right? The physical world, the tangible world, Malchut. I hope that was clear. If it wasn't, please ask me and we can go over it again. Okay? And so much so that it's very beautiful what you brought up, because it's so much so that we can actually even fold the year in half and see that every shevet, or every tribe, or every month, right, and its energy, they're actually partners. So for example, right now we're about to transition into Rosh Chodesh Sivan, which is Gemini, right? Roughly end of May to end of June in the solar calendar. And exactly 6 months across the wheel, across the Machaneh, across the camp in the Midbar, is the month of Kislev, right? So that Sivan, Gemini, and Kislev, Sagittarius, right, are going to be both working together in face-to-face partnership of how to resolve particular energies, okay? And every single one of the months and every single one of the Shvatim. And the interesting thing is that these partnerships are helping to resolve the qualities of Beis Yosef and Beis David also, right? As they show up on the Beis Yosef side of the year, or the Beis David side of the year. I must pause and ask if that's clear, because I know that was a mouthful. It's clarifying. Yay. Okay. So for example, no, okay, I think we'll just go back into Rabbeinu's Torah here. Okay. Because I want us to really have time to really do hachana for Shavuot. Okay. So he says, Ki kabbalat Torah talui bazeh. He says, receiving Torah is dependent upon this. Upon what? Upon holding the polarities and holding and redeeming and bringing home all of the parts. You understand, be very soft in your mind now and in your heart now and in your hearing, in your neshama, in your body. What is Rabbi Nachman telling us? That these stories of harvesting are happening at this time of the year. And these stories of Megillat Rut, of bringing home the souls of the Gerim, that in turn give birth to the whole Seder Hishtalshelus, the tree of the genealogy of Mashiach ben David, right? This is not a coincidence. This is the deepest secrets and the deepest hashgacha pratit, right, of how to reweave, right, and elevate all of our stories to include the falls, to include the shame, to include the rejection, to include the guilt, to include the humiliation, right, to include it all as one story, elevating us and helping us to grow from enslaved consciousness in Mitzrayim, right, to the highest expression of living Hashem's kingdom of heaven here on earth. Did that make sense? Why are the Mashiachs assigned to different times of the year? Such a beautiful, great concept and question. We're going very deep. Okay, why are they assigned to different times of the year? The easiest and most simple way to answer that question with Hashem's help right now is to say we have a masculine side of the year and a feminine side of the year. What we mean by that is we have a side of the year where it's called, we are in Isarusa dilatata. That's Aramaic. And what that means is it's a time for planting. It's a time for putting the seeds in the ground. It's very effortful. You can hear that, right? You can hear the difference, for example, between Rosh Hashanah and Pesach, even in the physical world as you're walking outside, right? It's a time of literally that the farmers planted seeds and then pray for rain, and they're weeding, and there's no fruit yet, right? There's no food to eat yet. We're still eating last year's crops, if we're lucky, if there's anything left. Yeah. And all of the energy now is going into the planting of the crops that we're not able to access it yet. Yeah. Does that make sense? We're waiting. It's a great deal of waiting. And while we're waiting, right, we're watering these seeds. How do we water the seeds? Okay, first of all, we water the seeds through prayer, right? That the actual prayer is to physically draw rain down into the world, that water the physical seeds. But the energy of prayer is to open up and create connection between heaven and earth, right? Between us and God. And all of that energy is building, right? When you're praying for something and it hasn't manifested yet, every prayer is never lost, because it's akin to watering a little seed, and you're not seeing anything happening yet, right? Then the next day you're watering it and you're pulling up the weeds, still nothing. As far as you know, this is a desert. You're not seeing the fruit of your efforts, right? But then after 6 months, right, in our structure, one day a tiny little green shoot pokes out. And now there's proof that something is happening, that all of the investment of your energy has actually moved something, shifted something, had an effect somewhere. Does that make sense? Yeah, so far? Is that making sense to you guys? And then we move into an energy that's called Isarusa Dila'ela, when we're beginning to see Hashem's responses to us. We're beginning to see the grass growing. We're beginning to see the sun warming the earth again, right? Spring is coming back. Summer is coming back. Just on the level of seasons, we can understand how fall and winter are there's scarcity, right? There's cold. People are not socializing. You're not seeing the fruit of your labors yet. In early spring, we begin to see tangibly, physically with our eyes, but that means it's also true spiritually. We begin to see the reward for our efforts. Does that make sense? Yeah? Does anybody want to ask something else in the chat? And these are two very different energies in the world, right? One is very masculine. It's very much about doing. And one is very feminine. It's about receiving. Okay? Can't see. All right, I'm going to continue unless somebody write something in the chat box, in which case I'm happy to review. Nod if that was a good enough explanation. Yeah? Okay. וזה בחינת עומר שעורים, שפירוש רבנו זיכרונה לברכה, עין מור, היינו בחינת התורה שהיא 70 פנים, שמקבלין על ידי בחינת עליתי מורי וכולי, שזה בחינת עומר שעורים כנ"ל. I'm going to do one more line and I'll translate. וזה בחינת ספירה, שמiyom ha'omer matchilin lisbor, שזה בחינת אסיפת וליקוט הנפשות שנפלו, שאנו עוסקים בימי הספירה בכל יום ויום ללקטם. Okay, this is a really deep piece of Torah. Okay, so B'ezrat Hashem. So Rabbi Nachman is saying, if you really want to receive Torah, the way to receive Torah is to receive all 70 faces of Torah. Remember, we have that expression, there are 70 faces of Torah. Let's unpack the 70 for a second. So there's 70 faces of Torah. There's 70 nations in the world. And when we went down to Mitzrayim, remember it was Yaakov Avinu and 70 root souls, right? So the 70 is going to come up again and again. Another example of the 70 is its gematria of yain, of wine, right? You have a yud and a yud, that's 20, 10 and 10, right? And then you have a nun sofi, which is 50, which is also going to give you the 70. Why did we reference that? Well, remember we say, nichnas yain yetzeh sod. When wine comes in, secrets are revealed. What are the secrets? The hidden parts. The parts we don't love, we hide away. The parts we don't talk about, Bruno, right? The parts we don't talk about, right? The parts that we're ashamed of, that they're energetically holding great light and great potential and great gifts. When we cut them off because we're afraid of their darkness, we're also cutting off accessibility to their light. Yeah. So Mashiach is about going in and retrieving the light that got trapped there. By light here, it might be easier to think of it as energy. Right? Think of all the energy that we invest in a shameful story in your life that you don't like to share, right? And all the energy that you have to use to hide that story, to pretend it didn't happen, to retell it in your life, or to obsess about it, right? To be an obsessive compulsive loop about it. That's a lot of energy investment, right? What if we could free that energy and bring it back home and use it for elevation and intimacy and connection and building and harmony and creativity, instead of it just going round and around every day, tormenting a person? That's part of what we mean by freeing the energy, right? And bringing it home. I hope that was clear. So here Rabbi Nachman says something so deep. And he says, from the first night that we began counting, part of what we have been doing is calling home the trapped energies, the trapped parts of self, the trapped parts of the 70 faces of us, the 70 faces of Torah, so we can receive whole healing. Not just healing for the cute and sweet and pretty and socially acceptable parts of us, right? Torah that can fix the shattered parts, the shame-filled parts, the guilt-ridden parts, the scared parts, the lonely parts, the bitter parts. We want to get Torah that it can water and enter and heal and restore all 70 parts of us, on the individual level and on the collective level, right? So he says, how do we do this? We begin by a step-by-step process that every single night we invite the light to come in and meet and look at and heal one other small part of ourselves, right? Like how we show up in chesed, how we show up in gvura, right? In every nook and cranny and nuance of those energies, right? So we're inviting the light to come in and heal that part and restore balance, first of all, even before we've done any heavy lifting of personal examinations or meditating or anything, just reciting the counting creates an opening for the possibility of light to shine on that part of our psyche. Isn't that beautiful? So it's not as effortful as we think. Okay. And so just as we've been moving into harvesting the barley, right? Harvesting the lower energies, the survival, more animalistic energies, and moving that to the wheat harvest. He says, we've been doing this every night of the Omer, calling parts of ourselves home and letting the light touch them. So beautiful. And he says, every single day, right? And now you're going to understand a little more of the view from the gallery of, of the Mekubalim, when we're talking about root being in the field, right? And gathering the fallen stalks. Oh, root being in the field and gathering the fallen stalks. It takes on a whole new meaning. You understand? She's the great grandmother of Mashiach ben David. She's in the field. Which field? The field of reality, the field of this physical world. Gathering, right, from a place of chesed, gathering the fallen stalks, the fallen sparks, the souls that have had really hard and shattering stories, right? She is the epitome of chesed, of loving kindness, of compassion, right? Upon the parts of self and the parts of other and the parts of the individual and the parts of the collective. She helps bring them home. That's what she does. Isn't that beautiful? So beautiful. By the way, this is not a root class. but having said that, the Mekubalim say that the inner etymological meaning of the name root, you'll notice two things. One thing you'll notice is that if you spell out ha-Torah, you will have the name of the letter of root and the hey of Hashem, right? Torah, taf, vav, resh, hey, root, resh, vav, taf, plus the hey of tshuva, tashuv, hey, right? And the hey of Hashem. The other thing the Mekubalim say about her name is that her name etymologically is actually connected to the name Revaya, right? As in David HaMelech says, right? Kosi Revaya, my cup is overflowing. Overflowing with what? What's my cup and what's overflowing? And this is a deep, deep secret to the spiritual tool of prayer, of tefillah, right? To call home the sparks, to call home the fallen energies, to call home the parts that are suffering. Okay, that's just a little side point. Yes, Ruth was a convert. She sure was. Okay, to not just any convert. Nope. I'm not getting to the root class now. I want to finish this. Okay. ולקבצם להביאם תחת המספר והמניין שלא יהיה נעדר ונדחה ונאבד אחד מהם. You know what Rabbi Nachman is telling us here? When we count every night, the message that we're saying is that even the broken parts of us count. Even the shame-filled parts of us count. And he says, specifically by counting them, we're letting them know that they count. that they're included in the story of our lives. And then they're included in the story of Mashiach. And that it had to happen the way that it happened. And that it's perfect the way that it happened. And every detail of the story has a home. It has a home, right? Until he says that everything is counted and there is no part that is left rejected, abandoned, disowned, right? Or lost. Do you understand what why do we care? Why is he saying this? He's saying the only way to receive Torah at an intimate and personal level is to have this belief and this trust and this faith that Hashem has been guiding your story the whole time, particularly those parts of your story that you think are not redeemable, right? That you think shouldn't have happened the way that they happened. He says, no, that becomes literally the basis for the revelation of Mashiach ben David. How do we know? If we look through the entire genealogy of Malchut Beit David, it's one fallen story after another. And yet, right? And yet it's not. Okay, let's let Rabbi Nachman talk. Shezeh b'chinat sfira, ki hadavar hamitbazer v'nidche eino tachat haminyan. Because Rabbeinu is saying, in life, right? Imagine the fallen stalks on the floors of the fields. It's called shichacha. It's like, forget it, right? Why should I go back and get it, right? Why should I pick up that story? The parts of myself that have gotten disconnected so much and so lost and so forgotten about. He says, like, we're like, you know what? That doesn't even count, right? No. You know how this whole story became activated? Lag BaOmer night, when Yaakov Avinu goes back, right? Yaakov from the word, right? He crosses the Yabok River, which is Yabok plus the 70 parts. He crosses over the Yabok River, which is the same letters of his name, minus the 70 parts, to go back and call home the 70 parts. The parts that I think are unlovable, the parts I think are unworthy, the parts I think God is ashamed of, the parts I think God is angry at me about, the parts that think I deserve punishment. No. I need to receive Torah as a whole vessel. All my parts, all my stories, right? All of my experiences, it's all meant to be brought to Ma'amad Har Sinai and get integrated and healed and elevated and used in my shlichut, in my mission. It's all been perfectly orchestrated. Ki nehafach minyanim u'misparim al yedei hapizur shenitpazru u'nefotzu b'daled kanfot ha'aretz. Right? It says, right? We think that we've been sprinkled and gathered and shattered. Sorry, not gathered, the opposite. Sprinkled and shattered and spread out and dispersed. Right? To such a point that there's a loss of a sense of, I lost track of my story, right? But do you understand what Rabbi Nachman is saying? There's a Torah of your life. And that Torah happened exactly in the order that it happened, in the way that it happened, for the deepest, deepest reasons. And this is part of the reason that we read Megillat Ruth on Shavuot, right? To understand, 1 second, they weren't married, and this one snuck in the dark with that one, and this one thought he was sleeping with this one, but he was really sleeping with that one. The most shame-filled, seemingly shame-filled stories, right? Of darkness and deceit and sneaking around, and a lack of consciousness and a lack of intention. And yet those are the very stories that Hashem uses to create the genealogy of David HaMelech, the ultimate redeemer of humankind, the redeemer of our personal stories and our collective story. So beautiful. אבל עכשיו, אנו מקיימים מצוות ספירה, ללקטם ולקבצם ולהביאם תחת הספירה והמניין, שלא יעדר אחד מהם. If you understand, Sfirat HaOmer is about counting every lost part of your life, every prayer that you think didn't get answered, right? Every part that you think is unredeemable, and bringing it back to the story. No, it had to unfold like that. It had to happen like that, so that I could learn this and elevate that and help and give back in the world in this way and not that way. Ki hanitzotzot vehanefashot hen hayamim vehamidot. He says every single day, right? We were dancing with a very particular energy in a particular way, where the energy came at us in a certain way, and we showed up in a way to relationship with that energy in precisely the way we showed up. Maybe it was blocked. Maybe it was unconscious, right? But that's the way that it needed to happen in those moments. Ki kulam yotz'im mibchinat zayin yamim zayin midot kiyadua. Because all of these energies at source are flowing out, right, of a wholeness of a vessel, zayin, the 7, of the 7 days of the week, of the 7 energy qualities of, right, the 5 of the emotions, 1 of relationshiping, 1 of receiving. Kiyadua, ve'al ken, al yedei sfirat hayamim mekabtzin hanefashot kanal. Through counting these days, we go back and we redeem all the days that maybe we were off and we were unaware and we were unconscious. We go back into Yesod Shebe Yesod. We go back into Chesed of Gvura, whatever it is. And by counting them, we realize we can make every experience count, even the times we were asleep, even the times we weren't conscious. V'kol ze al yedei bechinat omer se'orim shehu bechinat aliti mori kanal. And all of this, teaches Rabbi Nachman, right, is through the barley harvest. And by the barley harvest, we're going back into the times we were out of alignment, right? The times we did not use our energy in fruitful ways. And now it elevates those times. We bring, to understand what he's saying, we can go back and bring awareness to past immature parts of ourselves, to past stories of when we weren't able to show up in an elevated way. But they're never lost, those stories. We can, when we count them, we go back and we harvest the light that was there then and is available now. Ve'al ken sofrin le'omer kanal. Ve'al ken mitpalelin az יודוך עמים וכולי, דהיינו שיעלו כל הנפשות והניצוצות מבין העמים וישובו אליו ויודו אותו יתברך. Saying, right, we can go back and redeem our stories, draw the light out, draw the lessons out, draw the messages out, draw out all the things that we've now understand, that now we're conscious of, that we weren't conscious of then, and bring those energies home, bring those experiences home. And then he says, and then we begin to pray, right? And what is our prayer? He says, Yodu, right? We begin to thank, to praise, to acknowledge, to take accountability. It's all the same word, hod, right? This gorgeous energy and quality of, by our accountability, by our admittance, by our acknowledging, we can bring those parts home, right? We can reintegrate those stories. This is avodah you're saying we can do on Shavuot night day. No, Rabbi Nachman is saying we have been doing this avodah every night that we count Sfirat HaOmer. This is part of what we mean by the harvest. Okay, we'll do one more piece and we'll finish for tonight, Bezrat Hashem. Does anybody want to ask a question or have a comment until what we did now? I know this is a lot. We're doing a lot because Shavuot is in a few days. So we'll just pour light down and see, as much as we can, drink up and drink in, to prepare our vessels for Shavuot. Okay. I'm just checking the chat. Yes. Someone wrote, so then Shavuot is experiencing that light of integration. Yes. It's the chita harvest. Chita is the food of integration, of da'as. It's the food of da'as. Okay, we're in Seif Gimel. V'zeh shekatuv b'chodesh hashlishi v'chulei v'yichan. This is for you, Elisheva. V'yichan sham Yisrael neged hahar belev shalem be'achdut. He says, now the Mekubalim are inviting us into the juiciness of when it says in the third month, it wants you to prick up your ears and notice that anytime you encounter the number 3 in Torah, it's talking about reintegration, rebalancing, reconnecting, right? As in chesed, that's one polarity. Gvura, pulling the polarity to the other extreme. Tiferet, integration, balance, harmony, right? A new path. So whenever you see 3, the Torah is wanting you to prick up your ears and say, there's an opportunity here for a renewal, a reintegration, a stepping back into connection on a higher level with more awareness, with more wholeness. Yeah? Okay. So it says, this is why it says we receive Torah in the third month. That is in the energy and the quality of 3, of Tiferet, reintegration, right? And you can see this was the entire story on the Rebbe Akiva level of right, disintegration, the breakdown of relationships for the first 33 days of the Omer, right? Yeah, remember they're dying, which is the ultimate disintegration, disconnection. We've said many times in class, it's the divorce of the body and the soul, right? Death is the divorce of the body and soul. So we have this breakdown of relationship, breakdown of lights and vessels, because it wasn't working the way we were doing it, right? Total breakdown of the system. And then for 33 days, we're practicing how to do connection on a more elevated, holistic, whole level, where the underlying fundamental quality is going to be rachamim, compassion on ourselves and all the parts of self, and bringing them home and bringing the stories home. And of course, by extension, compassion on other, right? And their struggles and their parts and their stories, and helping to bring those home. And by the time we reach the 33rd day, Lag BaOmer, right? Now we have some new tools. Now we have some more compassion. So Rabbi Akiva's students stop dying, and Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Elazar stop burning people up with the eyes of judgment and criticism and separation, right? Yeah? Yeah, you're with me? And we can draw in, if we'd like, also the rainbow, right? There's a rainbow of separation, like Yosef's rainbow colored coat, right? And there's a rainbow of reintegration, where Yosef begins to make peace with Yehuda and with the brothers, right? Okay. So anytime you're going to see 3, it's hinting to the middle column. So it's going to be hinting first and foremost to the qualities of Keter, Da'as, Tiferet, Yesod, Malchut, right? And it's going to be hinting to Yosef HaTzadik and David HaMelech having qualities of being able to access compassion, to open a possibility of stepping into reconnection and re-relationshiping with more peace, more wholeness, more compassion, more beauty, more integration. Okay? All right. And that's why Rabbi Nachman is teaching us here that when it says that in the 3rd month, we were able to access chen, right? Vayichan means we camped, but it's a play on words. We were able to access chen, grace, the 50th gate, a new beginning in connection. Vayichan Sham Yisrael, it's very particular, the name that's used here, not Yaakov, right? Yisrael. Yisrael again is about synthesis. It's Tiferet. It's the middle column. It's the 3rd way. It's the peace path. Neged hahau belev shalem, right? With a full heart. Again, when can you ever have a full heart? When you've come to a level of inner peace, first and foremost, compassion and peace towards the parts in you. The parts in you that say, I'm not forgivable, I'm not lovable, I'm not worthy, I'm not good, I don't deserve, right? Those parts. Belev shalem, be'achdut, with unity. Ki kodem hayu mefuzarim umeforadim. Before that, we were shaken out, right? Scattered to all 4 corners of the earth, right? And disconnected, separated, separate. What separates generally? Fear separates. Control separates. Resentment separates. Anger and jealousy, those things are usually also only motivated by fear. Judgment, also motivated by fear, right? And we don't mean yir'ah, awe. We mean fallen fear, right? A fear of not having enough, a fear of scarcity, a fear of death, a fear of a lack of control, a fear of not knowing. But those are normal to feel those fears. Those parts of us need help to elevate. They need to be listened to and seen and spoken to and loved and accepted and brought to higher states of consciousness, not cut off and shamed, right? That's the point. Ki adayin lo yitasfu yachad kol hanefashot, right? Because we didn't know how to put the parts together, all the parts. all the parts of one another, all the parts. Aval chashav b'sof yemei hasfira, but now that we're reaching the end of counting all the parts, see where this is going? Nitkabetzin kulam yachad kol hanefashot. All the parts are finding home. All the parts are finding relief and a place. And they're being gathered together. Again, Chazal is wanting you, Rabbeinu, is wanting you to prick up your ears and understand when we're harvesting, when we're gathering harvest, right? It's not just physical, it's spiritual as well. Ubishvil ze nikra Shavuot atzeret. And this is one of the reasons why we call Shavuot atzeret, right? The time of ending, of ceasing, of adding, of increasing. Kanal. Ve'az melaktin kol hanefashot yachad b'shavuot. Because there's a spiritual energy available of reunion, remembering, as in again, right? Remembering, putting the pieces back together again, stepping back into connection. You can hear that. The whole month is about twins. It's about face-to-face relationship, partnering, coming back into the possibility of intimate and whole and vulnerable and delightful and playful and juicy and passionate and creative connection. Bivchinat aliti mori in besami kanal, right? This is, again, he's giving the example of mixing all of the spices, the ones that are healing, the ones that smell good, the ones that smell bad, right? Mixing them and creating a new compound that's healing. Shezeh b'chinat omer seorim, ushtei halechem shel chitim shehem ma'achal adam. And now we move from a barley offering to offering 2 whole baked loaves of bread made with chametz and made from wheat. Why 2? Again, the partnering, being able to step back into a more baked, a fuller level of connection, peace, right? Real peace, shalom, shlemut, and partnering. You're going to see the partnering theme in your face again and again, right? The 2 luchot, right? The 2 tablets, Gemini and the twins, the 2 kruvim and angels facing each other, Na'aseh and Nishma, right? It's all about the partnering, the masculine and the feminine, right? The sound and light, right? You're going to see the 2s showing up again, and then again and again, some 3rd element and quality that is able to harmonize these polarities in a way that we didn't know how to do before and didn't have access to before. Okay, we'll just finish this piece. Hainu bechinat marat nefesh shehi bechinat behemiut. In other words, connecting and elevating now the bitterness of our life and the more animalistic parts of self, which are very fear-driven, which are driven by survival instinct. And right, he says, Ta'avot kanal zebechinat omer seorim. This is like likened to the barley harvest. The ma'alot otam gamken kanal. And to elevate those parts instead of hating those parts of ourselves, disowning those parts of ourselves, hiding them in shame, pretending they don't exist, stuffing them down, eating over them, using over them, right? Entering into addictions over them, bring them home. Im besamiz epichinat shtei halechem, right? With your sweet spices, this is the 2 loaves of wheat bread. Shehem bechinat nefashot tovot, shehem nikarim adam baalei de'ah, right? To connect those forgotten and rejected parts of self to elevated self called an Adam, a human being, one who possesses presence, mindfulness, consciousness, refinement, sensitivity. ועל ידי זה מקבלים התורה בשבועות כנ"ל, ואזי נמשך השגחה שלמה כנ"ל. And then we're able to receive the Torah, and with a full awareness of the divine providence that brought us to exactly who we are today and what we are today and where we are today in connection with self and other. וזהו שנאורין כל הלילה בשבועות כדי לזכות להמשיך קבלת התורה. And this is one of the reasons we stay awake the entire night of Shavuot, meaning we don't want to slip out of consciousness, right? We're practicing staying awake more, not only physically awake, but more awake in our lives, more whole, more integrated, more present, more aware, right? More vulnerable, more parts of us able and willing to be seen and to see. Okay, almost done. שהיא בחינת השגחה שלמה כנ"ל, שהיא נמשכת מבחינת עינה דלא נעים, right? It's represented by the eyes that don't close, meaning an awareness of hashgacha, an awareness of the messages that Hashem is giving us, of the ways that Hashem is sending us hints to wake up, to elevate, to move into a fuller, more whole way of showing up and being in the world. Ve'al ken enam yeshenim kol halayla. And therefore we try, we don't have to, but we try to stay awake more than we usually are awake. Gam nidod hashena ze bechinat shvirat tavot maman she'i choshech atzvut sitra hamot demota. And again, he's saying also staying awake is also to stay awake to that Hashem is providing, that you have everything that you need, that you can let go, right, of control, right? And stay awake means notice and see all the ways Hashem is showing up for you right here, right now in your life. Because the scarcity, the not knowing, the controlling, the fear, that draws us into a different state of consciousness. How do we elevate those parts? By beginning to notice all the ways Hashem does show up for us in life. Beginning to notice that, become aware. Okay, I think we will, well, no, all right, I'll finish this. I'm getting tired. I'll finish this piece. Ki afilu ashiruti kedusha. מכל מקום נראה לי, באמונה היא גם כן בחינת שינה כמובא בדברי רבנו, אך אותו השינה היא טובה כדי לחדש מוחו. Okay, good. Again, Rabbeinu is saying, sometimes you'll see in Rabbi Nachman's writings, the deep importance of going to sleep, right? Of letting the computer sleep and rest, that it's a deep way of elevating and resting when you're about to grow in consciousness, right? Like a little baby, you'll notice when they come into the world, they have to sleep a lot. So we might think that Shavuot night would be the perfect night to sleep, right? So because we're elevating consciousness, we're upgrading, we're downloading all these new downloads. Literally, I mean that in the most literal sense. On Shavuot morning, your whole system is getting upgraded, literally, right? Energetically, I mean, right? So we think that we might think then that's a perfect time to sleep, so that we can rest the conscious mind, right? But he says, Aval keshenoflim letavot mamon chas v'sholom tzichim lenaded shena hainu lishbor tavat mamon v'alken kabbalat Torah shehi talui b'shvirat tavat mamon I'll tell you in a second what he's talking about here. Al ken neorin mikodem kol halayla lishbor sheina shehi bechinat mamon. Here he's saying there is something very important and beautiful if we, to the extent that you can stay awake on Shavuot night. He's talking about breaking a desire to control the nourishment, the bracha, the actual physical shefa that comes into your life by being almost like scared to let go of control, right? So he's saying there's something about staying awake, right? That helps to remind us that, so to speak, Hashem is always awake, is always dancing with us in a very dynamic and present relationship, very intimate, so that it's not mechanical at all. It's the opposite of mechanical. And so not going to sleep is kind of representing stepping out of the mode of the body and of mechanics, right? And entering into the higher dimension where you need less sleep, just for one night. Okay, we'll end here because my body is telling me it needs to end here. Does anybody have a comment or a question on anything that we did tonight? I wonder if there's a setting that I can unmute all. Let me see. Sorry, I don't know how to do that. So I'll just individually, I guess, unmute you all. Can't do that either. I'm sorry. I'm not so good at this. I'm just learning. Okay. Raise your hand if you want to ask a question and I will unmute you. Okay.
So,
yes. Unmuted.
Thank you for the efforts. I just want to synthesize, see if every time you have two, there comes a third one and brings them together. It's like that pasuk, the rule in the Torah, right? So on the second month is the two, right here, and then comes the third, the nation who is three. I just read this recently. The nation who is three on the third day, and the man who is third. I guess because he's third in the family. I guess that's why he's called the third.
You'll see there's so many threes. Like the Bnei Zachar talks about Kohen Levi Yisrael, Avram Yitzchak, Chesed Gvura Tiferet, the mind, the heart, and the body. There's many, many threes that we're seeking to integrate, right? Ish, Isha, Ushrina, B'neinim. Uh-oh, did I lose you? Did I lose you? Oh, okay. Did I lose you, honey? Wow, hold on, let me again try to unmute.
Oh, here we go. Oh, this is a crazy system. No, Rochelle was also, everybody was unmuted and we were hearing an echo. So I guess if you're not talking, maybe afterwards we can talk about, like I can help you or someone can help you figure out how to start a class and not have to do this whole mute business. But anyway.
Well, I'll tell you what the setting is. The setting was mute participants upon entry. And the reason I had it set like that is because sometimes people come late to the class and they're not muted. And then the whole recording has that noise in the background. But I'll have to take off that setting because otherwise it doesn't let people talk the whole class. I'm sorry, everybody. Yeah.
You can also mute people for them, even if they come and they forget to mute and they're interrupting the class. You can mute them.
Okay.
Sorry to be technical, everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Somebody asked in the chat box. So when are we going to teach again? So tomorrow morning, Tzvat time, Tuesday morning, 10 a.m. Tzvat time. we will be learning live and via Zoom at Rachel Brachas. I will bring my computer and it will be recorded, and we will just continue to prepare as much as we can and up until Shavuot, please God. Okay, everybody? Yeah. Oish, everybody's muted. All right, let me pause. Let me stop the recording. Stop recording.